For decades, New York City was more than a place. It was a pulse, a rhythm that echoed through the skyscrapers, across the rivers, and deep into the hearts of millions who dreamed beneath its skyline. It was the city that defined ambition, the place where the world came to prove itself, and where dreams, no matter how fragile, could find a home. But somewhere between the chaos of progress and the stillness of modern times, something began to change. Something subtle at first, a whisper beneath the noise, a crack in the concrete. The streets that once roared with life began to sound different, quieter, colder. New York has always known struggle, blackouts, recessions, terror, pandemics, and each time it came back stronger. But this time, the enemy isn't a disaster you can see. It's an emptiness you can feel. As dusk falls, you can still see the lights of Manhattan flicker like fireflies against the night. But look closer. Many of those windows are dark inside. Office floors, once packed with movement, now echo only the hum of distant HVAC systems. Entire buildings stand half empty, silent monuments to a time when the world still needed to be here, in person. The streets tell the rest of the story. In neighborhoods like Midtown and the financial district, for lease signs multiply like scars. Coffee shops that once overflowed with commuters now sit in eerie calm, their chairs stacked, their walls collecting dust. The same blocks that pulsed with energy a few years ago now hum with the quiet rhythm of loss. During the pandemic, the exodus began. What started as a temporary retreat turned into a permanent escape. Hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers left, seeking space, affordability, and a sense of safety. Florida, Texas, North Carolina, the new frontiers of the modern American migrant. The cost of living had finally broken the spirit of those who once said they'd never leave New York. For the first time in generations, people stopped fighting to stay. They started fighting to leave. The dream that once defined the city, that promise of making it here, began to fracture. Because how do you make it in a place that seems to be falling apart from within? How do you hold on to the myth of invincibility when the streets you loved now feel like a memory? Walk through Times Square at midnight. The billboards still blaze like suns, screaming color into the darkness. But beneath them, you'll notice it. The emptiness between the crowds, the silence between footsteps. It feels like watching a movie on mute. The same setting, the same stage, but the soul, missing. Crime whispers again through the subway tunnels, not the violent chaos of the 70s, but something subtler, a return of unease. People who used to walk freely now look over their shoulders again. The scent of uncertainty lingers in the air, the kind that tells you something has shifted beneath the surface, something deeper than statistics or headlines. New York's skyline still stands tall, proud, defiant, immortal. But behind those glass towers are cracks that no one wants to talk about. A hollowing out, a slow bleed of life and purpose. The landlords blame the economy. The city blames remote work. The people blame crime and rent and politicians. But maybe it's something greater. Maybe New York is paying the price of its own legend, a city that became so expensive, so exhausting, so impossible to sustain, that the dream itself began to collapse under its own weight. Because when you build a place that never sleeps, eventually, it has to rest. And when it does, what remains is not silence. It's a haunting. The sound of what used to be, the echo of ambition fading through empty streets, the ghost of a city that once believed it could never die. And as dawn breaks over the East River, you can almost hear it. The faint hum of a city trying to remember its own rhythm. A heartbeat slowing, but still alive. Still hoping. Still waiting for someone to bring the noise back. Every city tells a story, but few have seen theirs rewritten as quickly or as painfully as New York's. The last few years have carved new scars across its skyline, invisible to tourists, but impossible to ignore for those who call it home. Between 2020 and 2024, the city lost more residents than at any other time in modern history. Census numbers show the truth like an autopsy. Neighborhoods hollowed out, apartments left behind, schools with fewer children, subway stations that feel like echoes of their former selves. It's not just people leaving, it's energy, it's rhythm, it's faith. The reasons vary, but they rhyme. For some, it is the rent, a one-bedroom apartment that costs as much as a house in another state. For others, it's safety, the creeping rise in petty crime, the constant tension that rides the subway rails late at night. And for many, it is exhaustion, the fatigue of surviving in a place that no longer feels worth the price. They pack their cars, close the doors of their small apartments, and drive south. Some end up in Florida, drawn by sunshine and tax breaks. Others go to Texas, chasing opportunity. Some simply disappear into smaller towns, quieter lives, lower costs. The reasons don't matter as much as the pattern. A city once overflowing is now leaking. The wealthy adapt. They always do. They move upstate or out of state, but they keep their ties. It's the middle class that vanishes. The teachers, the service workers, the nurses, the artists. The heartbeat of New York, the people who made it human, are the ones fading out first. And the irony? The city, once accused of being overcrowded, now feels empty. Not visually. The buildings still stand, the lights still shine, but spiritually. The spark that made strangers talk, that turned chaos into community, that spark is dimmer now. You can see it in the businesses. In Brooklyn, entire blocks that once thrived on morning rushes and after-work crowds are eerily quiet. The corner delis where you'd hear 3 languages in 5 minutes now echo with silence. Laundromats, diners, small bars, gone, one by one. They survived 9/11. They survived the financial crash, but they couldn't survive the slow bleed of people leaving. In Manhattan, skyscrapers are half empty. Not because of disaster, but because of convenience. Remote work rewrote the rules. You no longer have to be here to make it here. And that simple truth struck at the core of what New York was built on: presence. The city was always powered by its density, its energy, its friction, its collisions of life. Now that same density feels like a burden. The crowded trains are thinner, the long commutes feel unnecessary, and suddenly the dream of a small house somewhere else seems more real than the fantasy of a big future here. Even the skyline feels uncertain. New towers rise, but for who? The luxury condos shimmer above the clouds, but the people who once filled their shadows, the workers, the families, the dreamers, are disappearing. A 2-tier city is emerging, one for those who can afford to stay and one for those who have already been priced out. And beneath it all, a quiet question grows louder. What happens to New York when people stop needing New York? In the past, leaving meant failure. If you couldn't handle the pressure, you weren't tough enough for the city. But now, leaving feels like freedom, an escape from the grind, the stress, the endless noise that once defined pride. And that shift, that change in identity, may be the city's greatest loss of all. The New York spirit was built on persistence, on surviving against the odds, on believing that no matter how hard things got, this city was worth it. But when the dream turns into exhaustion, when survival becomes routine, the magic fades. The exodus isn't just about moving trucks and forwarding addresses. It is a symptom of something deeper, a loss of connection between the people and the place that once gave them purpose. It's the unraveling of a social fabric woven from ambition and noise and hope. And as more leave, what's left behind begins to change. More vacancies, more silence, more shadows. The landlords still raise prices. The politicians still promise revival. And the city still tells itself that it is fine, that it is eternal, that it is just another rough patch. But beneath that bravado you can feel it. The tremor in the ground, the weight in the air, the sound of something great slowly losing its balance. This isn't the end of New York, but it's the beginning of something else, something unfamiliar, a quieter chapter, one written in empty apartments, in quiet streets, in the distance between what was and what's left. The departure continues, not with noise but with absence, not with chaos but with silence. And in that silence, the city waits, unsure if it's losing its people, or if its people are simply losing faith in it. From afar, New York's skyline still looks untouchable. A jagged crown of glass and steel piercing the clouds, proud and eternal. But step closer, and you'll feel it. Something's missing. The sound of motion, the rhythm of humanity, the heartbeat that once pulsed through every street corner and office corridor. The towers still stand, but they no longer hum with life. They are monuments now, hollow temples to an age that has quietly ended. Inside, fluorescent lights flicker above empty cubicles. Conference rooms gather dust. The smell of stale carpet lingers where thousands once rushed, argued, built, and dreamed. What used to be a daily ritual, the migration of millions into Manhattan's core, has turned into a ghost routine. Since 2020, commercial vacancy rates have surged to their highest levels in decades. Buildings that were once impossible to rent are now impossible to fill. Entire floors sit dark for months, even years. What was once a sea of ambition has become a museum of absence. The city's greatest strength and its density has become its weakness. New York was built for presence, for contact, for collisions of people, ideas, and ambition. But remote work changed everything. Now presence is optional. The world learned it could exist, even thrive, without being here. And that truth hit harder than any financial crash. Corporate leaders promised that the workers would return, that the soul of the office would reignite. But the city's arteries never fully refilled. Even today on a Monday morning, you can walk through Midtown and hear the wind. Glass towers shimmer above empty streets, reflections without substance. And this emptiness spreads. For every office that closes, a coffee shop dies. For every cafe that shutters, a block loses its pulse. Entire microeconomies built around proximity now stand still, waiting for footsteps that no longer come. Some developers have tried to adapt. They talk of converting offices into housing, turning the hollow towers into vertical neighborhoods. It sounds like hope, but it's not simple. Most buildings weren't designed for human living. Their cores are too deep, their windows too sparse, their plumbing too centralized. The dream of transformation is there, but the reality is concrete and steel, immovable and costly. Meanwhile, homelessness surges. Tents rise beneath the overpasses and subway stations become shelters. The irony is painful. A city overflowing with empty buildings yet unable to house its people. The skyline is full, but the streets are not. The real estate tycoons call it a market correction. But to the eyes of an ordinary New Yorker, it feels like something deeper, a moral correction, a reminder that a city is not made of towers, but of people. And when those people are pushed out, what remains is architecture without purpose. At night, the contrast becomes haunting. Look from the Brooklyn Bridge and the city still glows. The Empire State Building lights the horizon like a promise that refuses to die. But the glow hides the truth, that many of those windows are dark inside, reflections of a dream slowly dimming. In the canyons of Wall Street, you can hear your own footsteps echo. The financial heart of the world beating slower than it ever has. The energy that once fueled global markets now feels replaced by resignation. The city that once defined progress now questions its own direction. Some call it a cycle, the ebb and flow of urban life. Others whisper that it's decline. But maybe it's something else entirely, a transformation too slow to see but too vast to stop. Technology liberated people from geography, but in doing so, it robbed cities like New York of their necessity. The gravity that once pulled the world here has weakened. The digital age has made everywhere feel closer, and New York, for the first time in its history, feels far away. And yet, even in this hollowing out, there's defiance. You see it in the few who still arrive each morning, walking into the silence of empty lobbies. You see it in the janitors who still polish marble floors no one steps on. You see it in the street vendors who still open their carts at dawn, hoping someone, anyone, will pass by. The city may be quieter, but it's not dead. It's simply between breaths. These towers, these hollow towers, are waiting. waiting for noise, for motion, for purpose. Because if there's one truth about New York, it's that it remembers. Even in silence, it waits for the return of sound. And somewhere deep in its bones, it believes that one day the footsteps will come back. That one day the hollow towers will fill again, not just with workers, but with life. Until then, the skyline stands, proud, empty, enduring, a monument not to power, but to pause, a moment suspended in glass and steel, as a restless city learns what stillness feels like. There's something haunting about watching a giant forget what it once was. New York, the city that shaped dreams, defined ambition, and wrote the rhythm of the modern world, now walks like a ghost through its own streets. It is still beautiful, still proud, still massive, but there's a fog over it now, not just in the air but in the soul. For generations, this city was the proof that humanity could build something bigger than itself. Every brick, every bridge, every light on the skyline was a declaration. We are here, we will endure. But endurance has a cost, and after decades of constant motion, of running, building, fighting, even giants get tired. New York's fatigue isn't just economic, it's spiritual. You can feel it in the subway cars where strangers no longer make eye contact, in the bodegas where the laughter is quieter, in the art galleries where beauty feels nostalgic, like it's remembering better days. The truth is, the city hasn't fallen, it's fading. Slowly, softly, like an old photograph losing its color. Some call it transformation, others call it decline, but maybe it's both. Because what is a city if not a living thing, breathing, evolving, shedding its skin over and over again? The people who left took more than just their belongings. They took the city's sound, its pulse, its confidence. They took the sense of purpose that made New York. New York. And yet, for all that's gone, something still lingers. Something ancient. Something unbreakable. The city has seen worse. It has survived fires, plagues, financial ruin, and fear. It has watched towers fall and still raised its skyline again. Time and again it has died, and yet somehow it has always found a way to live. But this time, the battle is not with flames or rubble, it's with forgetfulness. A slow erosion of memory, and not of history, but of meaning. What happens when the city that never sleeps forgets why it stayed awake? There's a strange melancholy in walking through the Village or Soho today. The creativity that once spilled out of cafes and tiny studios feels quieter. The artists who made this city vibrant are fading, replaced by empty storefronts and rising rents. Even Wall Street, that symbol of endless drive, feels subdued. Its heartbeat slower, its roar replaced by a hum of uncertainty. Still, not all is lost. In corners you'd never think to look, the soul still flickers. In a small jazz club, a saxophone cries out to a room half full. In a dim-lit subway station, a violinist plays for change and memory. On a rooftop in Brooklyn, a painter works under flickering lights, capturing a city that's still trying to remember itself. New York may be bleeding, but it's still alive. And maybe, just maybe, this is the pause it needs. The silence before the rebirth. Because every time the world has counted it out, this city has risen again. Different, scarred, but defiant. There will come a day when the towers hum again, when the subways overflow with new faces chasing old dreams, when the streets roar not with horns and sirens but with laughter, because this city was never built to end, only to evolve. Yes, the old New York may be fading, but perhaps that's the only way the new one can be born. Not through noise, but through quiet. Not through crowds, but through rediscovery. In the end, New York will not die. It will remember. And from that memory, from that stubborn, unshakable memory, it will rise again. It always does. Because even when the streets go silent, even when the skyline goes dark, even when it feels like the city has forgotten who it is, the people somewhere remember. They remember the rush, the rhythm, the impossible beauty of it all. And maybe that's enough. Because a city, like a soul, never truly dies. It only waits for the sound of footsteps returning, for the laughter echoing through its canyons, for the light to return behind the glass. New York sleeps now, but it dreams, deeply, restlessly, of the day it will wake again.